So when I first had to figure out this whole prayer thing, you got to understand, it felt like I was drowning. To sit in a chair and pray for me was just like, you know what I mean? Like it was just too much to handle. And I struggled with it for a long time because I knew it was important. I wasn't convinced in my heart that it was important, but I knew that I should be praying. And I didn't know what it looked like either. It's not like anybody sits you down and teaches you how to pray. And you read what Jesus says. Are you saying, Jesus, I should just say this? Yeah, this takes 20 seconds. That's real nice, you know? And then am I done praying after the Lord's Prayer? Or what is this whole prayer thing supposed to look like? So throughout my life, this morning, this is what I at least understand, that without thanksgiving, thanking him in the morning is I want to just say is a major piece or key to prayer. And so this morning, I went to bed last night knowing that I was going to get up. And I'm getting up because I'm convinced in my heart that without prayer, I lose my perspective. And if I lose my perspective, I'm terrible, okay? And what I mean by that is I don't mean I'm a terrible sinner. No, I'm a new creation who can't see that he's a new creation. And so then I begin to lose my active newness in my life. When I get up and I pray and I give thanks, I begin to see what's really true. If I don't look in the mirror of the truth in the morning, I tend not to treat people for what they're worth. I tend not to think of myself for what I'm worth to him. And my day just goes horribly wrong, okay? I become very bitey and sarcastic. You can ask my wife about that. When I don't pray, man, I can be really, really a jerk. And so praying is important to me because when I don't pray, I lose sight of who I actually am. And I become this old person who I used to be. And I'm not that old person anymore. I'm a new creation, but I lose sight of it. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm sitting there, and it's been a journey with prayer, but I'm just giving him thanks. And I'm always amazed for what I take for granted, that I'm breathing, and I woke up in a house, and I have a family, and I'm downstairs sitting at a table drinking coffee out of this machine that just makes it. You know, and it's just like, oh, wow, you're good. And I'm looking outside, the sun comes up, his mercy and grace is there, and I'm just beginning to get into the moment of the accurate reality, which is Thanksgiving. If you're not in Thanksgiving, you haven't even stepped into the right reality yet, okay? Because the fact that he thought of you and created you and gave you life and your heart beats, and you guys have heard me talk about this before, that is just amazing. And it's like, wow, you're lucky to be here. He thought it was a good idea to put you here. And the reason why he put you here in this place at this time was your best bet at getting to know him, according to Acts. So that's why he put you here. And that you might grope for him and find him. And so I'm just sitting there, and I'm overwhelmed by his goodness. I didn't get past Thanksgiving this morning, okay? And I'm just overwhelmed, and I'm thinking about, you know, his goodness and my wife and how much she's grown and circumstances. And I can get into my circumstances, which are currently well, but I'm not promised good circumstances, and I pull myself back. Because if you get into circumstances in your prayer, it's good to be thankful for the circumstances, but those things can all change, and I pull myself back to what Christ did. And I'm sitting there, and I have a granola bar bite, and I have my coffee, and I'm like, thank you for your body. Thank you for your blood, right? And I just eat it, and I'm just doing it in remembrance of him, because it doesn't matter what it is, and I'm just so thankful for what he did. And it's like, what possibly could go wrong today? Well, everything could go wrong, but it's not going to get in here. This thing was filled with something else this morning. Now, you could fill it with something else. Everything's going to fuel you throughout your day, but you could fill it. Why don't you just get a full tank in the morning? As soon as you wake up, fill it up so you don't fill it with anything else. Because the world will try to fill it up with something else and get you to see something else. So I've been having a great morning. All morning. And I'm just so impressed that we get to come to him like that. And that's why he died, so that we could come before him through the Holy Spirit to the Father and actually fellowship with him. So it's just amazing. And I'm talking about it's amazing for every single person in here. Because that's your opportunity to be able to pray or not. That's your freedom of whatever you choose to do. You either understand the importance of it or you haven't been enlightened to it yet. And I'm okay if you haven't been enlightened to it yet. Because the Lord told me that I was having issue with people needing to be a certain maturity level. And he said, I never took issue with you when you were immature for decades. It's like, okay. Sorry. It's okay, right? And so I'm cool with immaturity in the sense of I don't need you to be a certain level. It's not going to get under my skin. And but it grieves me when people miss out on what's available to them. Or as if, because when you're not in thanksgiving, I am convinced that he doesn't hear your prayers. You might say, what do you mean he doesn't hear my prayers? When you're not in thanksgiving, your prayers aren't even valid. He says, offer up your prayers and supplications with thanksgiving. That's the postage stamp that you put on your prayers. Because if you don't, you haven't even seen what it is that you need to see. And so I'm going to just talk to you guys a little bit about a concern. I've always been, how many of you guys have ever discerned? You have discernment, but discernment sometimes feels like judgment and criticism. Does that make sense? Like you're in something and you're like, oh man, this just doesn't feel right. And then you have these thoughts and they seem a little bit judgmental and you're like, but I don't know if that's true, but you feel as if something's wrong. Does that make sense? And so you're trying to navigate and understand that. And I didn't want to talk this way because I didn't want to sound judgmental or criticizing anybody. And it's nobody in here. It's mostly the church at large. And I don't like to talk about the bride in a certain way, but I really felt like God said, no, I just go ahead and you can talk about it in that way because it's true. And I said, okay. Because I'm not here to beat up on other denominations or anything like that. It's just, this is a problem as a whole and it affects all of us. And I just want to talk to you guys about it this morning. I'm at a conference and it doesn't matter whose conference it was or what, but they bring in this big gun to speak. And I've sat it's a minister's conference, and I've sat in ministers' conferences before. And I could tell you exactly what they're going to teach on and what's going to happen at the end and what's going to even happen at the ministry time. It's always the same thing. And this person begins to preach on the storm when Jesus stayed on the shore and the disciples were in the boat and the wind's blowing and it's in the fourth watch and they can't get to the other side of the shore. And all of a sudden Jesus is done praying and he's walking on water and they think they see a spirit. Are you guys familiar with this? And they cry aloud because they think it's the spirit of death coming to take their lives. And the minister began to tell us that sooner or later you're going to have to understand that God's in control. And he said God's in control 7 times, and I just sat there, and 7 times I guarded my heart against what he was saying. Because you got to be careful on who you're listening to and what's being said around you. And if it's not true, then you don't listen to it. Okay? And then he began to use the story to illustrate his point, which was that God's going to rescue you from your circumstances. And I said in my heart, oh my gosh, that's not true. And I stood against that. I'm not saying that God doesn't rescue us from our circumstances. What I'm saying is that you've been rescued, and now you're going to find yourself in circumstances, and whether or not you believe you've been rescued is how you're going to respond. But if you think God's going to rescue you from every circumstance, you will be disappointed and probably fall away from the faith. Has anybody been in a circumstance in which God didn't rescue them from? Okay, that doesn't mean he's not a good God. It just means that you've been rescued and now you find yourself in a situation in which you get to be the light of the world in. Okay? You might say, well, I don't believe that's true. Well, just ask Paul right before that first stone hit him in the face. Okay? Paul, preaching the gospel, they take him out again to stone him, and the rocks are coming. They're softball-sized rocks, and here they come, and he's saying, oh, here we go again. Right? And he's probably excited because he's kind of excited to go to the Father and be in heaven. But he's torn because he wants to be here for people and bring as many people with him as he can, and all of a sudden he wakes up because people prayed over his probably dead body, and he's back. And what Paul does in those circumstances, he doesn't say, can you believe these people? I'm trying to help them and share the gospel with them, and they're killing me, literally, and throwing me in prison. Man, what a season I'm in right now. This is a really hard season. Paul gets up and he seeks the kingdom. Because in the kingdom is peace, joy, and righteousness. Okay? And I'm going to try to explain this, and I really want you just to track with me and not judge what I'm saying. Your level and peace and joy is completely up to you. It has nothing to do with your parents, your circumstance, your job, what's happened to you. Your level of peace and joy is completely up to you, and the Bible says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what a man sows. You either sow into seeking the kingdom, have peace, and have joy because you do or you don't, but it has little to do with your circumstance. But I know what all of you guys are thinking because I used to think the same way. But when I'm in a circumstance, it feels like my peace and joy are taken. The moment that you feel like your peace and joy are taken is the moment that you get out your magnifying glass and start seeking the kingdom. Because that's where peace and joy is. It's in the kingdom, and to the degree that you seek it, you have it. If you don't have peace and joy, you could tell me why. Well, you got to understand what I'm going through. And I would say, did you know that in that you could seek the kingdom? And you could have peace and joy in the midst of that. Yeah, but then this happened. And did you know when that happened, you had the full responsibility of being able to seek the kingdom? Yeah, but because of that, then this happened. Well, that didn't even have to happen because when you seek the kingdom, you have peace and joy. And I really want you guys to understand this. When Paul's encouraging people, can you go into the hang in there slide? When Paul is encouraging people, it's because their family and their friends are being lit on fire and being eaten by lions. Okay, they're being persecuted. It's illegal for them to meet. You guys hear what I'm saying? And so when he is encouraging people that aren't in our circumstances, we get upset because one of our cars is being taken away from us, but we still have the other one, but we can't believe we're losing one. That's not what Paul's talking. He's talking about death and dying and everybody you know disappearing in an instant. Okay? And he's saying, hang in there to that. Not where we find ourselves. We are blessed beyond belief. It is incredible what we have. Paul is not writing to us in the sense of, hang in there, baby. But I swear, I go into these meetings and I hear this pulpit is used to say that to people that weren't in those circumstances, and people want a quick fix, okay? They feel bad about themselves, not because of the circumstances. They think it's the circumstance, but it's a lack of seeking the kingdom. That's really why they feel bad. And then they're attracted to a pulpit that is used to encourage you. Is this making sense? So then people want nothing against Max Lucado, the Max Lucado four-liner devotional to make them feel better, to believe that God is going to rescue you. Meanwhile, he already has. I'm not saying he can't do cool stuff in the midst of it, but not if you're not seeking the kingdom and not if you don't have peace and joy. Makes sense? Okay. Because this pulpit was never meant to be the spot of encouragement. Okay? It was meant to equip you to do ministry. It doesn't have anything to do with your circumstances. But there's a pressure upon a minister. Everybody say, poor you. To meet people where they're at. Meanwhile, that's not where you're supposed to be. You guys get what I'm saying? And so then this becomes a place of encouragement. Does that mean that I can never encourage you guys? No, I'm not saying that. But what the encouragement mentality keeps a you focus. It's a you focus. And the reason why you're so miserable is because you're you focused, and the encouragement only makes it worse because it's all about you. Meanwhile, when you find yourself in a lack of peace and joy, seek the kingdom and then start thinking about others and start serving others. And I guarantee you, everything that you think that circumstance is doing to you will literally disappear. Okay. The reason why the prophetic school is so important is because encouragement was supposed to come from one another. Okay? And again, I could tell AJ here, hey Jay, nice choice of shorts you have on today, right? And AJ could say thank you, You know, and that he could be like, oh, nice, you know. That feels good. But in 5 minutes from now, it will disappear, right? He's not going to go home tonight and say, Jess, you know what, my life here in Adam, when he said that about my shorts, Man. But if I said, AJ, I was praying and the Lord told me this about your life, and I believe that I heard the Lord say that this was going to happen, and it's the same thing the Lord's been putting on his heart. Boom, it's over. Now he's a train. And encouragement should always be to the benefit of that person seeking the kingdom. Because now my word's going to make him go to the Lord and seek the Lord on what it is that I just said and reconfirm what it is that he's been hearing. Or you say, I was praying, I thought of you, and I thought of this verse, and that verse was the exact verse that you turned to this morning in your devotionals. Now all of a sudden it's on. You guys get what I'm saying? So when I say encouragement, I mean along the lines of prophecy. I mean the Lord speaking to you on behalf of somebody else and sharing that. But because of the lack of the prophetic culture, that's why Brian's doing the prophetic school. That's why we do Kaio. Because of the lack of that culture, the pressure upon this thing to be that for people is immense. It's taken over our nation. Okay? So you can turn on any television, probably televangelist. I don't mean to put them all on the one page. I know there's exceptions. But the sermon is going to be about you and trying to encourage you. Has going to have very little to do with God and you serving him. And you've already been served. Right? By him to the fullest. And that's something you can get in touch with every morning. Amen? Okay. So I was listening to this person talking to me, and the sermon has everything to do with me and my circumstance, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just shutting it out and saying, no. I'm not letting that sucker in my heart. Because once I start to go that way, and these are some of the things that were said. It was like, and we all know that in ministry, that people are going to leave you. And we all know the pain that causes. And I wanted to raise my hand and say, excuse me. If that causes you pain, you're not seeking the kingdom. You guys understand that? The last thing I need in my life is anybody reinforcing what the enemy's saying. Through a sermon. Using the Bible. Okay? And so, I just want to say this in the right way. Your joy and your peace are completely up to you of whether or not you want to sow it. Because if you sow it, you will reap it. If you don't, you won't. And what scares me to death is what people do because they don't have peace and joy. They usually end up going to some form of what the world has to offer. That form of what the world has to offer is most likely, maybe it's not sin at first, it will turn into sin, and then there's always the risk of falling away from this thing called faith. And so that's not my desire for anybody. So if there's one thing that I wanted to say this morning, it's that at all costs seek the kingdom. Peace, joy, and righteousness are found in it. Anybody in here is having marriage trouble, seek the kingdom. Anybody here is struggling with your children or patience with it, you got to seek the kingdom. If anybody in here is feeling ripped off at work, well, you got to seek the kingdom. And when you stop praying for God to change the circumstance outside of Thanksgiving, and you begin to understand what it is you've been given and start giving him thanks, something happens to your prayers and they start to be heard. My goal is not to have my prayers answered. My goal is to be obedient to him because he's worthy. And then he said, if I'm obedient, then I love him. So let me just say this. I don't want to sound like, I think too often we try to sound like a Hallmark card. Listen to this. It says, God will use all things for good to those who love him. Okay? But in Christianity today, to make you feel better, I'll say this to you. Hey, God's going to be in the midst of that, and he's going to work that for good. No, he's not. It's completely up to AJ. I don't know if AJ loves God. Are you obedient? Do you seek the kingdom? Because if you're obedient, then we know that you love him. Then we'll know that he'll work all things for good. But if you're not seeking him, and loving him and obeying him, not everything is going to work for good. There's going to be tragedy, massive tragedy that was a waste. And I'm not saying if you seek him, you won't have tragedy, but if you do seek him, he'll use that tragedy for good. But do you see how we remove personal responsibility from the gospel in the name of grace, even though that's strange because grace is the empowerment of an individual? Not a permission slip to put a pacifier in your mouth and remove personal responsibility from you. It's completely up to you. Because that's what he's trying to say when he says, do not be deceived. A man reaps what he sows. Because it's so easy to fall for that other lie, which is this: well, everything's just going to be okay. Why? Because he's God. No. It has everything to do with you and your end and what you're willing to do and seek and how you're going to find him in the midst of what you're going through. Because your life could fall apart at the turn of next week based on what it is you're sowing. Well, won't God be there? He'll always be there and willing to be found by you so that you can have peace and joy. Absolutely. But I can't guarantee you that you're going to do it. I don't know what you're going to do. So when people say, don't worry, everything's going to be all right, it's like, well, it depends. Depends on what? On you. I can't tell you that everything's going to be all right. I know it's God's will and his desire that it be, but I don't know whether or not your heart understands how much responsibility you're involved in it. Everybody all right? Okay. Because it's real easy, and my wife just wrote the coolest blog post. Does anybody read my wife's blog post? Okay. She wrote this blog post about my dad. And man, it was just, she went and interviewed him, and it was about the clubhouse he built with one arm in our backyard. My dad has one arm. And if you've ever seen the guy with one arm, that's my dad. And he's amazing man, and I'm so glad that she wrote this about him. And he will not talk your ear off. Okay, I can promise you that. He just won't, unless you want to talk about Armageddon stuff. Then he's all in. You know, like the chicken flu, the chicken virus that got him pumped up. Anytime there's like a world threat, he gets real talkative. What was that? The bird flu. But outside of that stuff, he's a man of little words, and and there's this picture of him, and I treasure the picture. It's my older brother who passed away in '96, and it's 95 in the picture. My dad is dusting off his shoulder because he just got his Ranger tab because he was an airborne Ranger, and it's this really cool picture. And I remember at the funeral, people get really hallmarky at funerals and try to say right things to you that will absolutely destroy your theology and your relationship with God. And I think that's what we've done with the pulpit, is that in an effort to calm you down and make you feel like everything's okay, we've set up these sermons to encourage you, but when Monday comes, you still feel like hell because it's not even true biblically. If Monday comes and you're not seeking the kingdom, you're going to have a bad day. Why? Because you're reaping it. Doing stuff outside of doing stuff or staying up late instead of waking up early to pray, you'll reap that. You reap it. So I don't want you to be deceived. And when I'm sitting there and I'm hearing somebody say God is in control 7 times in a row, and this is the speaker that's talking to the entire, ministers, I'm freaked out a little bit. Because those ministers, I doubt, guarded their heart. Maybe some of them did, but they're going to go home and tell everybody in their congregation that everything's fine, everything's going to be okay, God's in control. That's not the ending of the book at all. Did you guys ever read it? What's everything come down to? The way someone lived their life? Well, I'm saved by grace. Yeah, on to good works. And if you're saved, your life will be the evidence of it, according to the word. That's why you're judged according to your deeds when they open up those books at the end. And I feel like there's such massive deception in the church today. And I'm not saying like, and we're the only church that isn't, because that would be a cult. But what I'm saying is I'm starting to see this stuff, and it sickens me a little bit, and I'm not nervous as in like I don't want that mindset on my people. I want to snap it off your heads. Okay? I want to snap that mindset off your heads that you are powerless and God's in control. He has authority. Okay? And was he controlling the storm? No. Did he have authority over the storm? Absolutely. But he's not putting a storm on them for 8 hours. But he does have authority over it. The storm is upon them. If one person in faith, because they had been seeking the kingdom, would have said this, hey guys, Jesus put us on this boat and sent us across. I'm sure we're going to be fine. There it is. Boom, storm would have stopped in a second. It would not have been able to bear those words from that person. I guarantee it. In the same way, the demoniac boy is still flipping out. He's demonized and he's got all these issues. And Jesus comes down off the mount and the Father says to Jesus, your disciples couldn't have healed him. And if one of those disciples would have said this, hey, Jesus, give it some time. I laid hands on him and I prayed in faith. That demon would have been out of there in a second. But see, the problem was the lack of faith. Faith comes from seeking. And so the problem is that's evident in that boat when everyone's freaking out. It's like, where's the peace? Well, they're reaping what it is they didn't sow. Does that make sense? And so all right. I was probably in a funk for about 6 years, depression-wise. And so a lot of times we guard depression. You know what I mean? And we guard it with our fists and because it has become part of our identity. You know what I mean? And when something outside of Christ becomes part of your identity, it's kind of twisted. So I'm going to talk about depression just briefly in what I'm saying here. I am telling you this, that you actually have permission from the kingdom to seek it until you get enough peace and joy in your heart that depression is crushed. Are you telling me that I don't seek the kingdom? I don't know. To be honest with you, if I was 5 years ago, I wish I would have raised my hand and asked somebody, hey, how do you seek the kingdom? How does that work? Because I want to do it. I'm not sure on what prayer looks like. I'm not sure how to pray. How do you pray? How do you pray? What do you do in prayer? What do you do in prayer? And have the humility to begin to ask how people seek so that you could do it yourself. While we're on the top, we might as well just start knocking down everything here. A lot of people guard divorce in the same way, okay? And I've often said this about divorced. There's some people in here who are divorced. Hey, don't do it again. Well, how's that sound? You know what I mean? Seek the kingdom in this one. While you're with this one, you seek the kingdom with all your heart, okay? And you wouldn't dream of it. But a lot of times people guard their experience and they say, no, it was justified. Can you say that you sought the kingdom as hard as you're seeking the kingdom now? Well, then, who knows? It's in the past, but seek the kingdom now. Stay with the one you're with and seek the kingdom now. Is that okay? I'll get in a horse stance and I won't hate. I'd block everyone. So, amen. Man, because I could say here and say, well, I'm not divorced, but man, I did some really stupid stuff. I mean, I'm lucky to be alive. I mean, I've done some idiotic stuff. I've made a lot of mistakes. And if I didn't know what it is that I know now, I would have gotten divorced. Because why? Because this person isn't meeting my needs. They must not be the right person. Boom, done. Right? But now I know that I can seek the kingdom, and what I'm looking for isn't in them, it's in the kingdom. Yeah. And I was hoping that somebody would give me peace and joy, but come on. It's impossible. Everybody all right? Yeah. All right. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't want that deception on anybody in this house here that takes personal responsibility, puts it on the Lord and says he's in control. It's not, you're not going to be able to find that in the Bible. You're going to find that he has authority. You're going to find that he shared his authority with us. And you're going to find yourself and I don't like that he did this, but he promised tribulation. Did he not? He said to take heart. And when you're in tribulation, you find out what you've been sown, what you've been sowing, and that's fun. And so when you find out that you don't have peace and joy, it's so cool just to admit it and say, hey, like Brian was saying with authenticity, just to say this, like, hey, I could have peace and joy right now, and so I have to leave and go pray till I find it. Because even in this circumstance, I could have it. And I'm not going to make up excuses. I've maybe not been as militant in my prayer life as I needed to be, and now I found the carpet's been pulled out from under me, and now I see what I've been reaping here, and I got to go. Or you could begin to tell people how bad it is, and you don't understand. And I don't know, like, Brian was talking the other day about how he's been through a lot in the past year and a half, and he has. And as his friend, I'm just careful at what I say and don't say. Sometimes I just don't say anything. I just stare at him, And the reason why I'm so careful with what I say is because I never want to give him something to lean on that isn't the gospel. You know what I mean? So, a lot of, hard things have happened, and I found myself, Brian isn't telling me so that I could stroke the problem with him and feed it. I know that. And he's telling me what's going on because I asked and I'm his friend. And so he'll tell me what's going on, and in the midst of it, I don't know how to respond, so I'll just stare at him. Sorry that happened. And that little phrase there, it's awesome in marriage. I'm sorry I came across that way. It's never my intention. Boom, done. Yeah, well, you hurt my feelings. Well, I'm sorry I did that. That was never my intention either. Boom. Just an apology. It's like and then the next wave comes in and you just apologize. It's just boom, it just crushes it. Anyway, that's free. Well, this is the way you sounded. I'm sorry. Because I'm learning that. Because I used to need people to hear what I had to say. It wasn't loving. You know what I mean? That is like Brian would often tell me, he'd say, why can't you just apologize? Oh, well, give me a second. Let me explain. Once you see where I'm coming from, you'll understand why I don't need to be the one to apologize. And then you'll apologize to me. And I guess that's a leadership thing. Like in leadership, one of the downfalls is, and it's positive and negatives. Like it's like you need to be heard, and you need people to do what it is you say. Because it's weird if they don't. You're like, hey, what'd I say? Like with my children. You do what you're told. Just go do it, right? Anyway. So, going back to and so I'm his friend, and you know what I just should have done? I should have immediately went to the Lord and just said, Lord, what are you saying to Brian? And answered you with prophetic word. You know what I mean? If I were to look back on it now and readjust it, I shouldn't have been silent. I should have went to the Lord and said, I've been praying for you. It's not like I didn't pray for you, but I didn't intently try to get a word for you. You know what I mean? That probably would have been helpful. I'm sorry. Put up the kitten slide again. If it's up there. So, there you go. That's my prophetic word to you. Hang in there, baby. So, let me just share with you just two more slides that I made real quick. It says, if you are the one who is in need, the moment that you're in need, you're outside of love, because love doesn't need anything. Love needs a vessel to pour itself out on, okay? You've now been made in his image. That's fully available to you. As long as you seek the kingdom, you'll be able to see that correctly, okay? But there's something that the community is supposed to be doing, but we practice isolation in this country, okay? So most people are just isolated. And it's like, Allison, will you just come up here? So let's say I'm with Allison, right? But I'm in need. So yes, I'm standing next to Allison. I could even be talking to her, but I'm looking at myself. This is where my attention is, and I'm waiting for Allison to get done talking to me so I can pour my heart out to her about how I'm really doing, right? Meanwhile, real community is me looking at Allison, focusing on her, listening to what she has to say. I know it sounds like a marriage seminar, right? But I'm here for her. I'm not in need of her to do something for me. But instead of doing that, we've just isolated ourselves, and now her and I don't even meet up or talk, you know what I mean, relationally in a community, but we do stand next to each other sometimes. But she has no idea what my prayer life is like, what my calling on my life is. She doesn't hold me accountable to it. You get what I'm saying? Okay, thank you. But we stand next to each other sometimes. But that's not community. Okay. The second thing is, in self, if you lack discipline, I remember 2 years ago, I felt like the Lord said to me, beware of the path of least resistance. When you lack discipline in this area, everything will just fall apart. And finally, I told you that the pulpit is used for encouraging, but that's not what the pulpit is used for. The pulpit is meant to equip the saints for the work of ministry. So you guys are ministers, and we're supposed to equip you. But if you need to be encouraged, then we end up encouraging you to the place of par, you know what I mean, to where you're okay. It's like, oh, I'm going to make it. Meanwhile, you're supposed to be this thundering person who loves the gospel, wearing their armor, and who's beating back hell, because that's your goal. It's not to keep hell outside of you, it's to keep hell outside of them. You guys get what I'm saying? But we become defensive in the sense of, as long as I'm not messing up, as long as my circumstances are okay, I can make it. And what are we doing? We're getting in a Christian community here? Let me stand next to you for a little bit. Okay, have a good day. Oh, yeah. But what is that? But we've been taught that. And so we, as a church, need to break that. It can't be how we do it. Everything cannot be programmed. I swear, people will listen to 7 sermons a week. They'll do anything but go into God in prayer. But that doesn't do anything. You can't drink from somebody else as the source. They're not the source. You got to go to the source. Finally, the encouragement, I'm supposed to strengthen myself in the Lord. If I am doing bad, I'm cool with that. I will have authenticity. I will go to Brian and say, hey, I'm not doing good. To the degree that I understand, here's why. Hold me accountable to the fact that I need to seek the kingdom. Make sense? Okay, that's the last slide. I felt like I was struggling through this sermon all week, and then last night I felt like the Lord got his point across to me, and I'm like, I've already made a PowerPoint. What do you want me to do with this other PowerPoint I made? If anybody knows me, I spend a lot of hours on these PowerPoints. Very slow. All right, why don't you guys just stand up for me? I want to make this announcement. We just need help clearing out these chairs for VBS tonight. And if you guys haven't signed up your kids, you can sign them up tonight. When you come, that's not a problem. If you're like, well, hey, can I bring friends? You absolutely can bring friends to come with your children. And something, I don't know what's going to happen at VBS, but I'm always shocked at what God does through these kids at VBS. So it's pretty exciting. Don't be afraid if you have neighbors. Just say, hey, my child's going to VBS tonight. Can I take your kid with us? It's a lot of fun. You should see the church. It's got all the cool stuff. That stuff is only to get them here so that they can hear about the Lord. You know what I mean? All right. So yeah, if some people could just help stay and help me clear out these chairs, that'd be wonderful. And again, that starts at 6 o'clock tonight. So Father, we just thank you for personal responsibility. Thank you that we get a say in how much peace and joy and righteousness we get to have. I am so glad it's not random. I am so glad it's not a lottery. God, but every morning I have the freedom to decide how much peace and joy I'm going to have. What power, what authority. And you are good. Lord, thank you for teaching me, for all the things that I reaped that I wasn't supposed to reap. Thanks for just, Brian and what he was saying this morning. Thank you so much. Thank you for continue to pull us out of deception or things that we're believing that aren't true. Just continue to help reshape our minds that we might believe the truth. You're good. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Hey, bless you guys. Have a great Sunday.